Would Fujifilm really kill their affordable rangefinder style camera line? This is a question I asked in a video a while back. The Fujifilm XE line is the perfect camera line for people starting out in their photography journey. It is perfect for travel, street and so many other kinds of photography. It brings the classic Fujifilm experience with a minimal camera body with all these tactile function buttons and dials. This way you get to experience shooting with your camera in manual mode and get to learn all the ins and outs of your camera and all those settings. But the Fujifilm XE4 was discontinued in early 2023 while barely being a 2-year-old camera, which came as a surprise to a lot of people. The Fujifilm XE4 wasn't a bad seller, but Fujifilm just couldn't keep up with the demand, especially in conjunction with the X100V, because apparently these two cameras had a lot of similar camera parts. That way, they prioritized the X100V and just left the XE4 out of the mix. And then a regional Fujifilm manager from France even went so far as to say in an interview that the XT100 as well as the XE line might be abandoned, but didn't say it outright. Instead, he kind of went around that subject, presumably so Fujifilm could keep the door open on still continuing the XE line. So the question is, will there be a new XE line camera? And after more than a year of waiting, we finally have that answer, and it is yes, we will have a Fujifilm XE5. Now, there have been some complaints about Fujifilm XE line cameras in the past, and I hope that the Fujifilm XE5 will solve those problems. In particular, compared to previous versions, the Fujifilm XE1, 2 and then coming to the 3, owners have complained about a deteriorating build quality. Coming from a very strong XE2, then it got a little worse with the XE3 and then way worse apparently with the XE4. This has been a widespread complaint about a lot of newer Fujifilm cameras, unfortunately. Now, apart from the build quality that definitely has to be improved, let me tell you what I think Fujifilm should change about the XE5 to make it more attractive to a broader audience. I would love to see Fujifilm implement the same shutter and ISO dial that the X106 also has, because right now you can only change your shutter speed with that dial and not the ISO. As the camera is already quite minimal, especially in comparison to earlier models, it would be very welcome to have this double dial so you could just keep all the other function buttons for other settings. In my opinion, the midline camera models from Fujifilm, the XE5, the XT50 and so on, suffer from this problem that people want more buttons and dials and the cameras just don't have them. But as people want the full Fujifilm experience, they kind of skip those models and go to the higher tier models. Now, thinking about it, that just might be a good sales tactic from Fujifilm there. They removed the focus switch for AFS, AFC and manual focus mode coming from the XE3 to the XE4. I think that they kind of shot themselves in the foot with that change, because a lot of people mostly shoot Fujifilm cameras for specifically that reason, to be able to change all the settings with those physical buttons and dials on the camera. And removing most of these possibilities greatly restricts users from doing that, of course. Instead, you have to dig into the menus to change all those settings, which is just not the Fujifilm experience and therefore not very enjoyable for a lot of people. I do not think that bodes well with a lot of Fujifilm shooters, and pretty sure they know it, so I'm really hoping for a switch that they will bring back this dial with the Fujifilm XE5. Well, this is kind of a given for all newer Fujifilm X system cameras. Every time a new processor comes out, the processor will be put in all of the cameras afterwards. So I think this Fujifilm XE5 will have the X-Trans 5 processor for general better handling and speed. The sensor on this new camera is something I'm very torn on. The Fujifilm XE4 had the X-Trans 4 sensor with 26 megapixels, and honestly I think that is mostly enough for a mid-tier camera like that one. Meaning, from what I've gathered so far, most people buying a camera like this because of their hobby, not because of their profession. And then some professional photographers just use a camera like this to just shoot for fun on the side as a second camera. Of course, this camera can still be used for professional work, that's not what I'm saying, but I just feel like most people using this camera do it for fun, and for that the 26 megapixels in my opinion are enough. But as we saw with the release of the XT50, this camera also has the X-Trans 5 processor, so there is no doubt in my mind the XE5 will also have the Fujifilm X-Trans 5 processor with 40 megapixels. This unfortunately will drive the price up quite a lot. So we know that Fujifilm's new kit lens, the 16 to 50mm lens, has been released without optical image stabilization, contrary to the previous kit lens, which was the 18 to 35mm from 2012, I think, which had optical image stabilization. And as this lens was released together with the XT50, that does actually have in-body image stabilization. I can only see Fujifilm releasing a new XE5 with in-body image stabilization as well, because in the year 2024 I could not imagine Fujifilm releasing a camera lens combo without any kind of stabilization. And of course, in-body image stabilization would also greatly benefit people shooting in darker conditions, especially with prime lenses that don't have any OIS, just like the 27mm f2.8 WR lens that was released together with the XE4 back in 2021 and makes a great kit together. It's a very minimal and compact kit. The viewfinder on the Fujifilm XE3 and XE4 are very similar apart from a boost mode that the XE4 has. Coming back to this year's X-T50, which I would count as being in the same territory as the XE5, this one also had the same viewfinder as the XE4 back then, so I can only see Fujifilm releasing the XE5 with this exact same viewfinder. And that is a 2.36 million dot viewfinder with a 0.62 magnification ratio. I haven't heard many negatives about this viewfinder being used. So Fujifilm seemingly doesn't need to change that viewfinder because people seem to be happy with it, but obviously they are very welcome to do so anyway. Lastly, and I'm not sure if this is possible without increasing the size of a new Fujifilm XE5, but a newer and better battery like the ones we see on the X-T5, XH2, 2S and so on would be very welcome in this new camera. But I think it's likely that a new battery like this would increase the size of the camera. Maybe they could make do with a little grip on the camera just like the XE2 and 3 had back then. This would also improve the ergonomics and handling of this camera. Now, there are certain features that people really hope Fujifilm would implement on their cameras, but I just cannot see them implementing it because they seem like features that are exclusive to their top line of cameras. So let's just say it, weather sealing, everyone's hoping for it, but I don't think we'll get it because this seems to be something that is exclusive to the top of line of Fujifilm cameras. Especially referring back to this year's X-T50, the biggest differentiating factor between this camera and the X-T5 now seems to be the weather sealing, with IBIS, the sensor, as well as the processor having caught up. And then also multiple card slots just doesn't seem like something they implement on their mid-tier cameras. As for the possible release of this new camera, I had a video a while back where I talked about 4 cameras that will be released by Fujifilm in the first months of 2024. I don't think this camera is one of these 4. But as we know from this awesome blog Fuji Rumors that this camera will be released in 2024, I think it will likely be towards the end of the year. Now, the next topic is probably the most painful of them all, and it is, what will this new Fujifilm XE5 cost? As we saw with the X-T50 this year, with all the new added features, they bumped up the MSRP from 900 euros on the X-T30 Mark II to 1,500 euros on the Fujifilm X-T50. This is a huge 67% increase in price, which really doesn't give great hopes for the XE5, because the XE4 also had an MSRP of 900 euros. So without taking into account other features or circumstances, with the XE4 costing 900 euros, I could see the XE5 also costing 1,500 euros, just like the new X-T50. Now I quickly want to mention who I think the XE line is actually for. I think the XE line is a great way to enter into the Fujifilm X system, but that in no way means that this is an entry-level camera. Because there are honestly a lot of people that just don't need any more than the XE4, for example, can offer. And then anyone thinking about entering into the Fujifilm X ecosystem, I would suggest buying a used camera, for example an XE2 or an XE3, which can be bought in a good condition for around 500 to 600 euros. That way you can build out your lens line up, and if you want to buy a new camera in the future, you can just do that. Anyway, the XE line of cameras are great to learn how to shoot manual because you have the shutter speed dial on top of your camera, and with a lot of lenses you have the aperture ring as well. So you really get the gist of what every setting does. And shooting that way can make you intentionally slow down the process of taking images. Therefore, you're thinking more about all the compositions you're shooting, and I think usually that just makes for better images. If you want to find out more about Fujifilm's new kit lens, the 16 to 50mm, and why I think this new lens splits opinions between hating or loving this lens, check out this video right here.